Steve Pavlina was mentioning today about motivation in terms of if one has a motivation to quit their job and be free, personally free for themselves, it doesn't really inspire others to help. So he was talking about what is our motivation, and my motivation for talking with myself isn't only for myself. Along the way, I've emphasized that I'm only talking to myself, but I'm saying that to take the edge off it seeming like I'm saying what to do or how to do it or what's right. I'm not doing that at all. And my motivation is to help other people like me somehow, but not by saying the way to do it, because I really don't know. And that would be negating people's ability to direct themselves and direct their own lives. So I'm showing me directing my own life and hoping that might help others in some way. Yesterday I shared that somebody I know from my mental health community had died last year and I didn't know. And it wasn't long after that other person from my community had died and I did know that that person died. And these tragedies that happen, these shortening of people's lives that happen, are what motivate me to keep going. I remember reading that book, The Grape Cure, and the lady was trying to cure herself of cancer with grapes, and she shared the struggle of her story and how at one point she wanted to give up, but then she realized that she needed to live and succeed in order to help people. And at times I felt like I don't know if I'll be able to continue to go on, especially when I'm nearly about to end my own life by my own hands. I really don't know if I'm gonna be able to keep going, and it doesn't even seem like it's my choice. But I'm still here, I'm still going, and it's sort of a slow go of a journey. But I feel like I need to figure stuff out enough to be able to stay strong in this type of perspective. Sometimes I feel like I'm speaking these bits of meaning to myself that I've seen and created myself, or I've created these perspectives and reframes and whatever you want to call it, and maybe one day I'll just speak this way and I won't write them down. I'll just be able to speak this way in a powerful way to help other people. And to keep the other paradigms away from people. So I spoke with my brain twin, I just got off the phone, and he said he was struggling, and I don't want to talk about personal details, but we were talking for a while and I was trying to give some of these reframes about what's happening that I've discovered, especially this last year, and I don't know how much that helps, but I was listening, and at some point it sounded like he kind of fell asleep, like he was breathing slightly, and he didn't say anything for probably about close to 5 minutes. And I was just there, I just sat on FaceTime audio listening to him breathe and realizing that it was an honor that he fell asleep, because one of the things he was talking about was his trouble sleeping. So to be on a call, to have the connection through technology, and he fell asleep when he's talking about he's fearful or having certain, quote, paranoid thoughts or what have you. But he fell asleep, and while I was listening to him breathe, I was feeling like we're in the same resonance. Like from my resonance, resonating towards him and listening to him and talking with him, those words, they calmed his brain down and he fell asleep. Maybe he can fall asleep either way, but I still think falling asleep while connected on the phone, there's an energy there. And I was sort of sending him the intention of an energy that maybe has taken a few more steps along figuring it out, or is perhaps a little less trapped than his energy, and just feeling that compassion and wanting it to be different for him, wanting him to be able to live his dreams. And interestingly enough, I wasn't sure when he was going to wake up or say something. And I didn't really have any plan in mind for how long I would sit there. But I felt it was important to stay connected. And at some point after about 5 minutes, he breathed in a way that I felt like he woke up. And then he said something like, being together in that silence is so restorative. So he said it from a perspective of he didn't fall asleep. But whether he did or not, he was aware that there was this space of silence, of us sharing that silence together, even though we're 2,000 miles apart. There was something restorative there. No words needed, no dialogue. Yeah. And then we talked a tiny bit more and then said goodbye. I didn't say anything about thinking that he fell asleep or anything, and it didn't matter. Like I said, it's more of an honor. If somebody's talking about how they're struggling and they're scared and then they fall asleep, that's like, wow, I feel touched that they've had that safe energy to fall asleep and just be restored for however short period of time. And in that space, and I'm not looking at him with the light of my eyes. I can't, but I can send the light of my ears towards that person, and they're safe to fall asleep in that space, even if their space that they're in now isn't feeling 100% psychologically safe, which can easily happen. And I've been experiencing that myself sometimes the last number of months. So yeah, this is motivated by others, and another reason that I don't mention others too much is that I don't know if there are others. We're all one. So naturally one is looking out for others. And I feel in my heart I do have the best intentions towards people. It seems like it's a struggle for me sometimes with the people who still seem to contain the thought stuff that would objectify me. So I'm outside the lens of psychiatry mostly now, but I'm still in the lens of my genetic history a little bit. And they just don't know who I am, and that's okay. I feel more compassion towards that now. I don't think they can know. If I can't even know, how can they know? And putting up a boundary there, a boundary like the affirmation, I'm a sparkly, shiny human being, and I bring joy to lots of people, and I can't be convinced otherwise. If somebody comes up with me with a memory like, remember you did this in high school, you were such a bitch, then I'd be like, I know who I am. At least right now. That could fade and go away, but that's okay too. It doesn't really have to stay. if I wanted all these positive aspects to stay all the time, that would fill up all the bandwidth. So, and to make room for the richness of experience, certain things need to subside in mind, and that's okay. It's like the universe playing me like a piano, and it's up to the universe what music gets played. But for as long as I've been doing this, talking to myself, it seems like the universe is okay with it, because I've been doing it for a long time, and over time I've progressively gotten a bit stronger, I think. And Steve also mentioned something about resonating more with people who are more into service than the self. So to me, this is part of my service, and it's partly to spread the subjectivity. And can this subjectivity, this talking from creating meaning internally, can that be spread somehow? You know, I've talked about embodying mania, I've talked about creating memes, I've talked about having dialogue with each other. I feel like we could have dialogue with each other, and I think creating some kind of co-creative community would be cool. I say that in theory, I don't know how it would be in practice, though I have lived with people at different times, and a lot of time it's a lot of fun. And I also kind of realized that this subjectivity, this richness, is love. It's the unknown. And can this richness and this love be passed on to others? Well, I think it naturally is. It naturally ripples outwards. And I got an email today about the shadow self or something, and I don't really study that too much anymore, but I think of it more in terms of the projector. We don't need to really go into analyzing all these parts of the shadow if we can stop projecting, and instead we can perceive in the moment. And I really don't think I'm motivated by money. I've been doing this, talking to myself for so long, and I am not asking for money for it. I'm motivated by creating meaning. I think meaning is a more powerful currency. One can have all the money in the world, and if they don't have any meaning, they're likely to end their existence. So meaning and the ability to create it is really important. And you know, Steve mentioned being able to prove that you would do the work even if help from others or money wouldn't come. And yeah, I would keep going creating this, and if I could physically create some kind of dream center like I was told to by a mystical man, then I would do that. It'd be really hard to build with my own two hands though. So that's why I created the idea of being a dream center within oneself. So it could also be that I'm meant to live my dream before creating the dream center. And the thing is, along the way, I've met a lot of different peers, and I recognize that they all have these skills and talents, and I really do think if we put them together, we could create something really cool. Put our energy into creating something cool, and less energy into solving all these personal problems that we're told that we have. I think that's not really how it is. And so can we create within ourselves and within others the subjectivity of love? And I don't think it's really that complicated. It's a matter of listening and perceiving in the moment, and not through projections, because projections are not love. Patterns aren't love. And wanting everyone to see the beauty within and without. And, oh, I'm going backwards in my book. Here, I only have about 1 million pages to go. And Steve also mentioned an interesting idea that I extrapolated to my own context. So his idea was, speaking of time scarcity, which means some people don't have enough time, like they're working 9 to 5 and they feel like they don't have enough time to do everything they want to do. And he compared it to graduating high school. And he said, you don't graduate high school by resisting it. You graduate it by doing the lessons, attending the classes, and like passing the lessons. And when he said that, my brain immediately extrapolated to so-called mania. And in mania, we get this energy and we go into this other world, like this whole different classroom of life. And then when all of a sudden the universe says, hey, no, you got to go back to the old classroom that was really boring, you're not quite ready for this classroom yet, then we resist it. So that's the same as sort of getting maybe pathologized. We resist it. And not that we should want to go and be pathologized per se, but a lot of times if we're, say, depressed or something, we're wishing for mania, but we're not necessarily going back and trying to learn the lessons of what being in that other classroom of mania was teaching us. And so just by resisting and being like, I don't like this situation, ooh, that's not going to make us pass and get into dream and subjectivity and awakeness class. So the universe came in and woke us up and put us in this class of dreamlike awakeness and wonderfulness. And then sometimes people do feel like they're being tested, or they do feel like if they don't do it right, they're going to be punished. And that's really the awareness that, hey, we're going to go back to the other class. We're going to go back to the other classroom, and we don't want to. But we can, like, if we were told that we had to go back a grade in school, we could remember what we learned in that other grade and start learning that, so then we can pass it better the next time. So the idea that I'm extrapolating is that resisting any of this doesn't really help. Learning and trying to figure out the lessons could work better. And I don't know if there's any kind of ultimate lesson, but I think learning is important. And he talked about describing what's on the movie screen. So some people might be like, I want to travel, and then he'll be like, well, that's very vague. Like, what is happening in that scene of you traveling? So in a way, when we go into mania, we did travel. We kind of traveled to the future, or to eternity, or to this consciousness of love. And so we kind of already know what the scene looks like. So by looking at that scene, we could also try to delineate how we might get there. And it might not even be, that could be the wrong perspective. We might not be able to get there except the universe, when the universe puts us there. And so the real thing might be, how does everyone get there? And then that's where diagnosis comes into play, where it's not about being diagnosed with a mental illness, but dia in terms of understanding, or in terms of speaking and studying and whatever the other word was, and gnosis as in understanding of spiritual whatever. I already forget. So our role, we end up getting diagnosed with a mental illness, but our role could be to diagnose, or not to diagnose, but to give our diagnosis, to share what we've learned from that subjectivity. But we're so, like, made afraid of ourselves that it's hard to ever get into the role of that. And we have to get ourselves into it. Nobody's going to do it for us. And we need to be able to find the words. And I did find some of my babble from my first mania. And, you know, if I have time to listen to it, I could post it. And one could think of it as, well, that was 7 years ago. Over 7 years ago now. And since then, I haven't babbled, I haven't spoken fast, because the babbling is the higher energy, but if I'm able to learn how to speak from that higher energy and speak the language of it, then I'm not going to be speaking incoherently. It's trying to, the energy, the higher energy is trying to show us a different way of speaking or using the English language to share meaning. And at first, it comes out as real meaninglessness, even though when people are babbling and out on the outside, they're feeling a very rich meaning on the inside. It feels meaningful subjectively for sure, but we're not quite able to share that in words. So it's up to us to figure out how to share that in words. And it is of the best intentions, because anyone who's been in mania would definitely love for anyone to have that rich subjective state, especially if it meant it didn't have to fall out into awfulness. And I don't think it has to when more and more of us understand this in a lot of different ways. Imagine if we have this way of sharing through English and sharing meaning and understanding and being in dialogue, as opposed to objectifying and pathologizing and labeling and summarizing things for people. And so when I was listening to Steve Pavlina, I wrote down, I want to create ripples to free others from trips to the psych ward. And I wrote, and to transfer to their GP, because that's what happened to me. I've been transferred to my GP, but I realized that my motive is kind of the same as the health authority around here right now. They're trying to close more people's files and have their care transferred to the GP. And in a way, I'm kind of on the same path, but it would be such that one would never have to go back to the acute care system. And not being transferred because somebody else says, hey, you're ready, but having people be ready for that themselves, and then be empowered to live their dreams and not live with meds from a GP in a basement. So it's still a bit of a different energy, but in realizing that what I ultimately kind of want to do, like empower people to stay away from the mental health system, is what the health authority is trying to do, because there's way too many people trying to access it for what is available. That's why you have to be like about to kill yourself or kill someone in order to be admitted into the psych ward. Because if you're not, then you're not serious enough. But I don't want to do that for the sake of the health authority and their funding. I want to do that for the sake of these people who are suffering so much, and then end up suffering even more in the hands of that kind of cold system. And I also wrote down, like, could we make a game for mental health meaning making? Like, I talk about doing self-dialogue, but is there a way to make a game out of it, like a board game or some kind of game, so people can play together and learn how to make this type of meaning out of their experiences? And I also feel like people that go from objective consciousness to subjective dominant consciousness, like mania, it's a different game of reality. It's like going from one world to another or something like that. Like in some games, there's the outside world, and then you go into different caves, which is a different type of world. Like the screen looks totally different. So it's sort of like that in a way. And realizing that we're playing a different game. We're not playing the game of linear personal growth and getting promotions and this and that. We're trying to change the game of reality in a way. And yeah, showing people how to find their own clues, and showing people how to look at the moment to know which way to go, and not to our conditioned preconceptions and what we've been told life is all about. And yeah, so I don't think that my job on this dialogue will be finished until I create my character. So I've been in the psych ward before, and I remember drawing all over my arms like different words to sort of remind me of why I'm here, and realizing that I have to create my artist self, like the artist version of myself, because who I am now is still like conditioned. Like I look pretty granola. Not that that's bad, but I don't look artful or interesting. And if I go into states of consciousness where I feel very artful and interesting and things are very meaningful, I could share some of those meanings in the way that I create my body. I really don't know. I think I already mentioned how the John Harold presentation about process-oriented approach, somebody asked about direct eye contact affecting them, which sounds what I've talked about with myself, about the light coming out of another person's eyes. Their projections are warping us, which could be explained as simple as how our psychiatrist looks at us, what they project onto us warps the way our future will go. And also what he said about watching how people light up or don't light up based on what he's saying. And I'm not able to do that with these dialogues. So some people might resonate with very few things. Some people might resonate with a lot. And the point is not to say whether it's right or wrong, but to get into creating one's own meaning for oneself. And maybe even extrapolating what I've extrapolated. And in that way, people who see other things related to what I say, but I haven't said it or seen it, they say it. I also feel like if somebody watches a couple videos that I've made, they might go into extrapolating and could not watch anything else that I have said and do their own 700 videos and say similar things and different things. So, and if we were doing that, we'd have a lot of meaning to share, as opposed to, the people who have the scientific information and the few papers and those people telling us what to think because it's based on science. Well, we can see a lot with our own eyes when we're not put to sleep by autopilot, routine, and self-consciousness. So I don't have that feedback, but I welcome feedback about some of these ideas. I feel that when we start all making meaning for ourselves, we'll create a different world together. And we'll see what's truly meaningful and what is arbitrarily meaningful, and we'll drop off those arbitrary structures. And John also mentioned believing that we're living in a virtual reality, not a material one. I think it's a bit of both. I mentioned already how it is pretty virtual though. But there are a lot of people living in objective consciousness, and we can't deny people that. And yeah, it's kind of virtual when it needs to be, to sort of reorganize things when like we're going the wrong way for too long. You know, there's definite leaps and quantum jumps and glitches in matrices and things like that. And we can just be like, oh yeah, simulator, you're so silly. But thanks for the help. And the one thing also that was interesting about what John Harold shared was about other channels of expressing. So if somebody doesn't want to talk, one could say, can you act out what you're feeling, or can you draw it, or can you whatever, like talk to a different channel. And also it could just be not the time to share that sort of thing. And also, we're not really fully able to act out and embody the subjectivity that we're in contact with, the love. Because if our brain is acting based on a love algorithm, we act completely different than the thought-based algorithm. So instead of that, we can do a lot of talking. And the words are in place of the action. So think about how the world is based on thought, and we're all going about our busy little lives. And then we have a few like enlightened masters who sit there and talk. Well, if we all knew what the enlightened masters did, we couldn't all sit there and talk about it, like trying to teach people, because everyone would know. So we would be doing something completely different. We'd be creating a different world. We wouldn't need people to teach us these things. We wouldn't need to listen to it. We would already know. So that's why I say if we all embodied that, we would be doing something completely different. And some of the things we would do would be what manic people do. And it wouldn't look weird because everyone would be feeling that way. So I think this was yeah, I do like what he said. I might have said this already, that it seems like the universe puts certain people in the experience of extreme states to teach us something to the broader group that is really meaningful and important. And he also said start mining for meaning, which is interesting because I say harvest. So, you know, we're kind of trying to say the same sort of thing. And I've said this before many times about how we need to teach, quote, them something, instead of them trying to teach us about our mental illness. You know, we get a diagnosis, but we have a diagnosis. We can speak our understanding of the spiritual mysteries, you know, and we need to speak our understanding of the spiritual mysteries as much as we're hearing about mental illness from professionals. And yeah. So at some point, it would be nice if I could get this down to some key ideas that would get people into their own creative meaning-making algorithm, because it doesn't really matter what I'm saying. And to be able to like hack meaning-making and create it as sort of a train the trainer thing, because I think that would spread it more. I don't even think we need to train people. It's just a different languaging that I feel really resonates with people. Like people that listen to John Harold, I bet tons of people resonate with what he says, and it's turned into this, he's studying this process work thing, and other people who have had these types of experience are like, wow, this type of work is really cool. If people have had these sorts of experiences, there are many different things that could help to process and integrate it. I think making meaning out of the experience is more powerful than getting stuck on sharing the particulars of the experience. Because, then we could just think about the same experience forever and think, that was so meaningful, I want it back. But what we really want back is the state of meaning making, where everything feels meaningful, not where that one particular experience did. And imagining that we can repeat that same thing, I don't think is really that helpful. And also helping people create something based on the waves of energy they do have, and not based on the arbitrary 9 to 5. And I wrote down some definitions because I was curious. Like, I don't know what a lot of these words mean in general, but like, for example, metacognition is awareness and understanding of one's own thought process. And, for me, this definition is a little troublesome because I don't know if there is such a thing as one's own thought process. For example, I don't think that we have separate minds. And I don't think that this thought process is something that we originated. I think it's something that we were programmed with. So to be aware of the programming as if it has some kind of reference to who we are is not necessarily beneficial, I don't think. But if we can understand that we've been programmed and move towards a brain process where we create meaning and information for ourselves from our own perceptions in the moment, then that could be some kind of valuable metacognition. And then I looked up, well, what's cognition? A result of perception, sensation, notion, or intuition. So we don't even really know what perception is. Our perception is conditioned by thought, and it's not perceiving the actual moment. It's not a present perception. And then our sensations are also conditioned by thought. So I think there's like this marbling of thought through everything, which messes up with our cognition and how it might naturally be if we were in a perceptual mode. Perceptual mode would be perception of the moment, naturally selecting what is important to act on. But when we have thoughts in there, thought tells us what's important to act on. It's usually something that's not even there. So we can't act on it, so there's the conflict. Like, how are we going to move based on something that's not there or happening? Notion or intuition, I don't even know what that means. And I don't know if this was part of the definition, but it says acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experience, and the senses. Now, acquiring knowledge would mean memory, and I don't really think that's important. Acquiring knowledge through thought is not really relevant because that's been conditioned. Experience is conditioned by thought. Senses are conditioned by thought. So really, what is cognition without being conditioned by thought? It's something totally different. And perception, the ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses. And our senses and experience are conditioned by thought. So our perception is warped by thought. So then I asked myself, what would enhance perception of the moment? Clearing the senses of thought, experience, and forgetting instead of remembering and accumulating knowledge. So we don't want to remember and accumulate knowledge. We assume accumulation is learning. So I was also thinking of this in terms of like nutrition and certain things, like maybe nootropics or nootropics or whatever they're called. And I looked up nootropic, and it says it's used to enhance memory and other cognitive functions. So I think maybe we don't want to enhance memory. We might want to enhance other cognitive functions that we might have available if we weren't remembering so much from our store of knowledge. If we didn't devote a lot of our capacity to energizing the recall of what's in our brain cells, but we were able to create with the perception of the moment. I don't think our cognitive functions are anything like what they say they should be, or what our idea of it is. So if one thinks of how cognition was working, or their brain was working, how their perception sensation was working, how their ability to see, hear, or become aware of something through the senses was working, it was wildly enhanced. Wildly. Anything, we couldn't even dream of how much it was enhanced. So I would say that figuring out how to have the brain's cognition working in that way would be more interesting than thinking that what we think of cognition now is what it is. I don't think it's that way. And I think I've talked a little bit about how these last number of months, up until recently, I haven't really been doing anything. So I kind of disabled the doer. And whether the energy was there or not, I didn't really do anything with it. And in that way, I feel that those doership circuits that are based on memory and pattern and habit are more gone. Like, I didn't really have any habits. I didn't have any patterns these last number of months. I just got up and went out and did whatever, and it wasn't the same. So my brain feels free from the need to create patterns in order to live, or habits. I think habits give us the permission to check out of the moment. And anytime we work towards doing something so automatically that we can go somewhere else in our mind, now that habit is tied in with going somewhere else in our mind, and it's that going somewhere else in our mind that isn't actual. And if we're building brain circuits of something that's not actual with what we're doing, then it's tied into that. So when the non-actuality starts to die, as in Alzheimer's, or sometimes a mental health label, we're not able to do anything. So being able to act without habit and memory and routine is really important. Getting close to perception, action in the moment. Like each moment is a fight or flight moment. And when the brain, so a lot of times people say, what matters? And what I'm wondering is what lights, what increases the vibration, what energizes. For energy to go up, the vibration has to go up. The lighter the material structure, the better it can vibrate, I think. And the brain is energizing meaning in a feedback loop that energizes the brain. And I wrote down that people are suffering from a scarcity of meaning because they don't know how to create it in the moment. Steve was talking one day about a guy who said, events have no meaning. We give meaning to it. But usually we we don't give meaning to it. We give the meaning to it that we get from our memory that was, like if we get fired, that means we're bad or something like that. But we can create any kind of meaning around that. And so that's what I do. And I don't know if there's any value in the meaning that I've created, but I think there's value in the ability to create meaning. And I'm not always able to do that. I could probably do that in a wider range than I do at the moment. But I haven't fully extrapolated that to other areas of my life. Maybe because I'm meant to keep talking about this for a while longer. I'll probably know when to put it down. Maybe never. If I have to sit here and talk to myself forever for the sake of other people, then I will do that. And I don't know what else I want to talk about.